Yeah. Not live, right?
Oh, no, I think we're up.
Okay. All right, today is Thursday, December 12th. It's 5 o'clock. This is the regularly scheduled Finance Committee meeting. I'm calling the meeting to order. Present are myself, Counselor Shoup, and Counselor Cushing, the best Finance Committee, so we get to do it again.
That will teach you from doing a good job last year.
Item number 3 is approval of minutes. Can I get a motion? Any discussion? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Next is item number 4, town audit update.
Yeah, thank you for letting us kind of sneak this on. First, kudos to Norm and his team. Norm told me that he had put a deadline or issued kind of a challenge to his staff to get things done before Thanksgiving. I thought he was crazy, but sure enough, he produced. And so we have the audit completed in record time. Thanks in large part to Norm and certainly Kate did her part as well. And then we do have a joint meeting scheduled with the Board of Education. It will be a workshop before your regular meeting on January 8th. And some members of the Board of Education, I'm sure, will attend, where we'll do the formal presentation from the auditor. We thought we'd kind kind of zoom in on one element, and I'll let kind of Norm take it from there.
Well, we had a good year on fund balance.
We did.
Yeah. You have that schedule you put up there. So we ended the year with, unassigned fund balance of $15,902,000. And, when applying that to our metric, of, last year's operating budgeted expenses, that gives us a, fund balance ratio of 14.46.
16th, the number we were looking at.
Well, yeah, just to review our last change to the fund balance, to the fiscal policy. We set the floor at 10 with some things to do if we got to 12 and then 16.67 was our aspirational goal.
Mhm.
So, we're 2/3 of the way there,
That's great.
to our aspirational goal after this year's, results.
Can you guys provide context? Because I remember at one point we were thinking it was gonna come in at 12.2 or somewhere in the 12s, and it's great that it's at 14.46, but just
Yeah.
curious, like what is it that got us there?
What got us there, starting at 10.5 million with the beginning of the year, last year's ending. In fiscal 24, we issued our GO bonds. We hadn't been issued in a while, so we had some catch up there. And that contributed, between the bonds themselves and the premium, that was roughly 2.5 million added to fund balance because we're paying ourselves back for stuff we've already spent. And we had talked multiple times previously about the impact of collecting on the Hygas Parkway advance.
Mhm.
And in fiscal 24, that contributed 1.2 million to the unassigned fund balance. And our excise tax revenue outperformed budget by 729,000.
Is that vehicle registrations?
It's anything motorized.
Predominantly vehicle.
Mhm.
So that's more cars.
More cars,
More cars, yeah, more people, therefore more cars. You know,
Yeah.
it's probably more than 1 to 1 in most cases.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That's probably a pretty good leading indicator growing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, we saw it in voter registration. We see it here. I think there's any number of metrics that you can kind of see the effect.
And then the last rather large item was our interest earnings outperformed budget by almost 940,000. We had the proverbial, we had budgeted for like 3 rate cuts from the Fed during fiscal 24, and only one actually happened. So we were able to achieve a higher rate of return on our available balances.
And as fund balance grows, we have more monies to invest. So it's a combination of those two things. So.
And as we get back into a normalized schedule of activities, our treasurer has better opportunity to keep an eye on the ball and more effectively invest those available funds.
Mhm.
There was a time period where that was the last thing on her mind. So
And are we invested mostly in money market type things, or do we get into equities at all?
we don't do equities. It's best practices for governments tell you not to do that because of the risk.
Sure.
Mhm.
Ironically, we are primarily invested in passbook savings, which gives us about a 4.25% rate of return because of the amount that we're able to put in there at our primary operating bank. And we've got a couple of investment vehicles at other banks that are they're an ICS product. What you do is you put your money on deposit with that bank, and then they reinvest it out with other banks in overnight CDs. And so you're meeting your FDIC risk tolerance by keeping it under 250,000. But you're in a CD product, so your rate, and we're getting 5.25% on those, just overnight funds that are, we can access them at a moment's notice. So we're very liquid, yet we're getting some pretty decent returns on our available balances.
Great.
The other thing in recent years, because of all sorts of factors, we've reduced the interest income. Some years, I think we zeroed it out. It was non-existent almost. And so
Mhm.
I think we're building back and we've surpassed kind of where we were historically. But I think
Yeah.
part of this big gain was honestly an underestimation on our part, in part because we were trying to predict what the Fed was going to do.
Yeah.
And again, more funds to invest.
Is there anything in this year's budget? Like I know the overlay we had was pretty big with the revow, and it seems like that's been not tapped into too much. Is that a fair statement?
True, yeah, I would assume there would be at least 400,000 at the end of it, unless anything big were to come through towards the deadline, which isn't known until February.
Okay.
And then there's also the Higas Parkway producing yet again in this
Similar
current.
amount, I think, probably a little more actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
We will nearly recover the full advance with this year's assessment in the Higas district.
Norm terms it as an advance. I prefer to think of it as, it's basically a deficit. We've been
Right.
owed over paying our debt responsibilities and not having enough revenue to offset those. So we had to make up the difference. And that was over $3 million by the end.
Mhm.
So we're now just paying ourselves back.
Mhm.
You know, this is a little bit of a segue from our meeting last evening, which we had a conversation about people's sensitivity to taxes. And I believe, John, you were pointing out that we had the lowest tax rate
Mhm.
in the region. And my sense was that one of our colleagues didn't doubt that, but didn't really attribute it as much as we think to a lot of excellent management practices that differentiate this community from others. And so I just point that out because I think that, as Liam said, it's growth, it's taxes. I keep forgetting the third one.
Traffic.
Traffic, growth, taxes, and traffic. So that's a sort of backhanded way of saying good job, but I think it's important to keep track of the good job.
Yeah.
So that,
Getting used to your backhanded compliments.
well, I don't want anybody's head to explode right in front of me.
No.
Great. So,
And
so,
one more thing,
Yeah.
real quick. It just, on the spreadsheet itself, there's 2 columns for FY 24. And it's just delineating between the old metrics and the new metrics. On the right, because our old metric was 8.33 was the minimum, and we pushed it up to 10, and that might be something we want to address.
Yeah.
The coming year in finances, going back and reevaluating that policy. And
Mhm. With this major leap from what we had last year of 10.2 to 14.4, when we have the meeting with the credit rating agencies, do you think this is gonna be something?
about a lot, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And do you think, is there potential that it could improve our rating, or is it still not at the?
No,
level?
I see it as a high potential for improving our rating, especially with S&P. Yeah, I'm right. The metric in the back of the ratings report, they had us at AA2
Mhm.
based on their scorecard, but they rated us AA3. And if you looked at the scorecard, fund balance was the lowest indicator, and they rated that as a BBB. So I expect that portion of the calculation to improve greatly, which one would think it would be cause for a ratings increase, but
If we're successful, that is an opportunity to communicate. I think that's
Mhm.
something that residents can appreciate, that our attention to these details and produces savings on the other end. I'm not sure if people really appreciate what 16.6%,
No.
they get lost in those details, but if they understand we're getting cheaper, better rates and therefore cheaper money, that should resonate. So that's an opportunity to communicate.
And I think with a large school bond potentially on the
I
ballot,
think
I
it's
think
perfect.
that really will help.
Yeah,
So fingers crossed that they increase our rating, but that we also continue this pattern. So that way, hopefully, we do eventually get to that 16.67.
yeah, there's two things that I want to highlight with the rating agencies. One, the fact that we self-imposed a higher standard. We raised the bar on ourselves, which I think probably doesn't move the needle, but I think it demonstrates that we are committed. And then we actually performed and made great leaps toward meeting that target. I think those two things are pretty powerful together.
I think we'll get some credit for that because one of the scorecard metrics is management. And, we're putting goals for ourselves as management to have a strong financial position. So I think we'll get some credit based on that.
Well, especially if we deliver.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. That was Moody's, that AA3, sorry.
Counselor Shoup, any questions? No? Anything else, Norm, Tom, Nick, on this topic?
No, we'll do a deeper dive. The auditor will present a full overview of the audit on the 8th.
Great.
And we're gonna have, our finance committee meeting is Monday and we'll have the same kind of quick run through
Good.
and then look forward to what those folks will bring for their presentation.
Great. All right, moving on to the next item, item 5, discussion on recommended goals and unfinished business. So again, we ended the last finance committee with a few things that were either in flight or not completely completed based on our goals last year. So I just wanted to kind of revisit that list, get feedback from the committee and staff, what might be a priority, as well as potential areas that we may want to bring to council goal setting as a committee in terms of, things that we would like to propose for full council adoption from a goal perspective. So the first item on the list that we had was last year we had asked Councilor Cushing to kind of take the lead on budget process improvements and how to better present the budget, not only to the council, but to the community, as well as how we go about setting budget goals to make sure that we, do things maybe a little bit differently than we have in the past. So I know you've been working with staff. So if we could just get a little update of kind of where that is and where we'd like to go and see that as we progress through the next budget cycle.
Okay, so in brief, I think Tom and Norm and Nick suffered through 2 documentaries on Better Budgeting 101 from me and the associated spreadsheet. And I'm not so sure I want to go through all of that again, but maybe I'll just review the basic tenets, which is, where are we now? Where are we going? But before we go anywhere, what are our commitments? And a huge portion of that is in people. So that when we go into 2025, we have contracts with police, we have contracts with fire, we have all of this stuff in people, which is 80% of the nut, as they say. And the question is, do we have discretion? Do we not have discretion in any of these areas? So sort of how much is committed now? And then those numbers, in order to be meaningful, really need to be backed up against full-time equivalents. If I tell you that we're going to spend $10 million on people, it matters whether or not that's for 10 people or 100 people. So that's generally sort of the gist of that. And that concept, to my mind, carries through the entire budget. And it really helps everyone understand what is actually in play. Okay, what do we have control over today? And in the today column, I think that says that these are areas that could be increased or they could be decreased. And I point that out because when I look at the big list of things that we aspire to, it may be that we will need to actually ask questions about trade-offs in order to get this. So we're willing to let this go as something else expired. That's the general concept of it. And so I presented kind of a mock-up spreadsheet, which I culled from the 40-pound budget book. And I gave it to Norm and Nick, and they culled it down to 7 or 8 categories. And on further reflection, you're going to have to remind me what there's people, there's purchase services, there's supplies, plant and equipment, those types of things. But the important piece of that, as I understand it, is those things live in the, now I know the name of it, the Muni system, or our accounting software, which means that it's pretty easy to pull out that data presently, historically, going forward. And frankly, you know, once you see those kinds of things, then there's some drill down. And if you have some detail behind it, then you can make decisions. And so, you know, if you get into purchase services in any department, the 80-20 rule probably applies. If the department managers call out the top 4 or 5 things that they buy externally, et cetera. So that's generally the concept. Nick, you responded to my email, and I'll just sort of give it back to you to say, you know, this will probably, I hope, be the last time I'll just repeat myself. I think it gets a little shorter each time, but now I think it's kind of in your court to actually translate that into something that's doable. And Kate, it's funny because I said, who have I not talked to about this? And I said this this morning. I said, I need to go pay her a visit because she should not get off scot-free.
I don't think I've had a documentary.
No,
I
probably.
love the word.
Careful what you
You might
share the wealth.
just bring your lunch.
Okay,
All right.
does it have an intermission?
But, you know, in fairness, Kate, last year we sort of had this discussion.
We did on the fly, right? And at the end.
And you came back from that on the fly, I think, with some very constructive changes where you had the budget cascading.
Mhm.
And, you know, it was late in the process, but I think it really shed a lot of light on the exact concept that I was getting at, which is what do we have to do? You know, what's an extension of what we are doing? What else would we like to do?
Yeah, and I'll just say, you know, I would love to, I'll get with Norman and Nick and see what it is that their culled down version of it is. But I would definitely like to watch the movie too.
Any thoughts from you guys from the conversation you had, ideas that we should anticipate getting that are going to be different this budget cycle?
I think, you know, the breakdown of those categories, and then as we're able, drilling down with specifics or perhaps the FTEs as part of the mix seems reasonable to try to accomplish, and it would create a framework for comparison that is, you know, standardized, not just line item detail. It would be grouped so it could be more easily looked at. But then one thing that comes to mind for me, these are improvements that will help you all. And I think that's high value because you report to the rest of the council on your discernment. But I would say one thing that's missing in that is perhaps what about the piece about communicating with the public? If any of you have any suggestions on that beyond what Councillor Cushing mentioned, it'd be good to know what your goals for that is, so we can try to make that more of a reality. If you envision a slightly different take on the communication with the public as part of the improvement process.
Well, I think we talked a bit about that yesterday, and we used the reval and asked, you know, the question really was, what is the secret sauce? And what we discovered, I think, as part of the success through your efforts with the reval, is that if you go back and do an after action on that, I think that we would pull out many of the, we could extract from that a lot of key strategies that we could employ throughout this process. So I think the focus of the communication strategy is how do we perfect, if, find some things that really work with the community, focus on them and keep doing them. And I think we have one big win and we can learn from that, try something else. So I had one other thought, and that is when we talked about the goal setting. Last year, we listened to lots of presentations from department managers and the like, and they were interesting and long. And this year, I think that by having all of the departments come in as part of the goal setting process and talk about their programs and their aspirations and so forth, that will help us establish goals that are consistent with their needs. And then perhaps we could really get drilled down with their presentations on a financial focus in the budget. That would be my hope, so that the idea is, first, we really want to learn about what you're doing, understand what you're doing, separate from you can have this money, you can't have this money. Let's get to know each other a little bit, and then let's move to the next phase and make that more concise and focused.
I think it would be also good seeing Kate here, that when we do the staff part of the goal setting, to give the school 15 minutes as well, just to kind of do the same type of update if you guys are available. So what we're talking about is trying to find a couple of hours for staff to kind of give an update. We have 3 new counselors, and so just making sure everybody knows where we've been, what people are working on, where we're going, I think has been part of the conversation. So hearing from Diane or somebody to kind of share the school's perspective, I think may also help with us with goals as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Mhm.
And I think the idea of front loading that, we talk a lot about that with our own team of, we shouldn't wait until the budget arrives for people to understand what we're doing.
Yeah.
Because it is long, it's complicated, right?
Yeah.
Right.
So when are you thinking that happens?
Sometime early January.
Yeah.
So we're still searching
Okay.
for a date.
Yeah,
Should know
just
Friday.
let me know what
Yep.
that looks like, and we'll see
We'll do.
who we can bring.
One other thing we've done over the last couple of years with some success, and I think something I'd like to build on, is to identify kind of a theme or themes of the budget. And for that, it helps to organize, it helps to, it hopefully is more relatable. It's not just a 40-pound budget book. There's a narrative that wraps around it. Yes, there's a bunch of stuff that we did last year and we've got to do again next year, but we're trying to do a better job of articulating what's different and or why are we making this investment this year. And you might recall last year, the recurring theme was really investing in our people.
Yeah.
We had 4 open collective bargaining agreements, and that was our priority.
Mhm.
I think the prior year was really listening. It was on the heels of the community survey, and it was about putting in action what the community has told us they want. And so we're meeting as a budget team on Monday, and one of the first points is what are the emerging themes this year?
One of the suggestions, maybe based on what we talked about in
Mhm.
finance, we've talked about the umbrella for communication to be around the vision statements in the comp plan, which the first one is around conservation and the marsh. So if we're gonna do something like that for communications, I would think looking at that as like a potential theme to say how we are investing or making choices in our community to advance the vision statements in the comp plan. That those are 5 things that could be structured in. I do feel like we have to somehow focus on the school with the teacher's contract and the school coming on the ballot. I don't know what that means in terms of a theme, but it's gonna be a big part of the conversation, I would think, this year.
Yeah, it strikes me as we need to prepare for next November. There will be presumably another school bond question. I think we need to use this budget vote in the spring as a warm up to that. We need to continue to demonstrate good, will and kind of, build for that big question that will be in
Mhm.
November.
The one piece though that we talked about at the workshop for the school, and again, if there's a school theme in this with the wages, the referendum, the
Right.
other piece is what is the investment we need to be making as the contingency to support the incoming.
I was thinking about that, like, what is our enrollment looking like? What is gonna be the interim plan
Mhm.
for meeting the needs of the kiddos before we get
Yeah.
the building project?
So it would be good to understand that as like a key investment we may need to make in the interim, because again, it just kind of sets the stage for communications that we'll need to do, because we have to invest likely at some point. I'm assuming, like, I don't know, maybe we don't, but my assumption is even if the school fingers crossed, the school passes in November, it's gonna take 3 years to build whatever we do. So there might be a year in there at least where we have to,
Things are getting tight.
yeah, and so maybe there is a financial investment that's required, or maybe not. But at least knowing and anticipating that, I think, and understanding that this year to make sure we're prepared for that would
Gonna
be
buy
good.
extra duct tape and baling wire. Yeah, those will be, yeah, it's gonna be tough.
Yeah, we
Getting to
make
that
a lot
point.
of jokes. We're stacking those containers. It's a big topic for us. And I don't think there'll be any surprises in what the school department is bringing to the table. It's all,
I'm always shocked.
are you? Well, no, I don't mean in terms of what our number is, because our numbers are always shocking. But in terms of what our themes
Of
are
course.
and
Yeah,
our
of
needs.
course.
I think to Don's point though, when it comes to communication, I think there's just, we probably have a basic opportunity, not so much to talk about the new budget, but more like what makes up our budget, to your point of like, there's certain things that are contracted, committed. I was telling Counselor Doherty yesterday that 80% of our budget is wages and staff.
Mhm.
And he didn't know that. And so, I mean, to me, that's an important thing that our community should know, is that this is really mostly people who are providing services. And then the other piece, I think, that I don't think people have a full appreciation for too, is the amount of fees and revenue we collect to offset the budget that minimizes the actual budget that we have to ask residents for. And so, again, I just think there's some basic things to know about, like what is the Scarborough budget made of, that maybe helps a little bit to, as a precursor before we get the new budget to.
Yeah, there could be some series of communications before the budget's even kind of out there.
Mhm.
Is
Yeah, and I think that it's become very clear to me in my time here that I way underappreciated the value that my tax dollars were bringing. And it's not a surprise that when you look under the hood, you find all kinds of things that that most people take for granted. And I think one of the things that would help, just in terms of that overall thing, is some kinds of metrics. Some of them maybe don't mean much internally, but I think of, the number of transactions that actually take place, or the number of interactions, and how many visits, how many beachgoers, how many miles of road,
Those data points.
how many storms, all of those kinds of things, how many pounds of trash. I mean, all of those things, if they stopped happening for any short period of time, people would notice quick. So I'm just trying to say that we would do much better to try to show the value that folks get in tangible terms and beyond, that little bit of thinking. I don't have real specifics about that. But the police department is really easy, right? I mean, we get that little report from Chief Holmquist about, and it's, an average week is, 300 or 400 calls, right? I mean, that's significant, particularly when half of them are at Walmart. No, just kidding.
Mhm. Yeah. My only other comment on the budget, and I don't know the answer to this. I always feel like we start with the proposal from the town and school and then have to make reductions. And I just hate that approach. I don't know how we change it, but what I would love to see is the conversation move from reductions to where we want to invest in our community. And so I don't know what that is. Like, in my mind, like, part of me would want to see us say, you guys are presenting a budget and, you know, there is a, focus on like meeting our commitments and doing those things. This might be the same thing you were saying of like, and this is what that number looks like. And then these are discretionary investments that we would like to make in our community that we need to potentially prioritize and make sure that we make the right investments, as opposed to having a conversation of where do we need to reduce the budget to hit an arbitrary goal that we set year over year. And so I don't know how we do that. I think some of that's more process and presentation than it is goals. And so I don't know what the answer is. You're shaking your head, so maybe you can articulate or offer a more specific idea.
I don't think I can offer, I can, it's a different way of presenting it. But I
Mhm.
think it's more for the residents. I think I can see how that would be beneficial that way. I don't know how you would do it.
I would note that the charter is set up very specifically, and I think intentionally.
Mhm.
It requires that I, in collaboration with the school, really provide the starting point. I'm tasked and obligated to propose a budget. Presumably that's based on our professional opinion of what it takes to do what we've always done and to do a little bit more, and this is why. Unfortunately, that does often put us in that position of just, what can we take away from the budget? That's really the majority of the conversation, but that's the way the charter has the process starting, is that
Mhm.
we present you a full budget with what we think we need to run the operation and make further investments for next year. Maybe the problem is the arbitrary goal that the council sets before they know what all of those things are.
And I think about
I
the
don't
way
mean to
the
turn it back on
process
you, but that's
works.
part of the equation.
No, it's true, it's true,
Yeah.
right? And I think one of the things that we do see in process is that between first reading and second reading, there's a lot of that goes on in both directions, where you have those items where you don't have to make a choice. My anthem rates came in and they're down. Isn't that great? Or my anthem rates came in and they're up. And isn't that horrible? And what am I gonna do? And there's that horse trading of, well, we'll take this out and put this in. So there's a lot of that, like you said, that happens during the process.
Mhm.
But I'm not sure if you started with a sort of, here's your budget and here's your extras. Is that what you're thinking?
Well, it's like, to your point, Tom, there is an explanation that you need to go through to provide a number. And if that explanation, and same thing for the school, can be, to Counselor Cushing's point, these are the mandatory things we have to invest in next year. Really not up for debate or discussion, they're just going in. And then these are the discretionary investments based on priorities, needs, et cetera. That is really kind of the net addition. And I think understanding what that is across the board, and then needing to say, okay, at some point, we do need to set a target, then we can really say, okay, with the discretionary items, what do we really want to invest in? Because I think even last year, for the school side, there was a lot of confusion still on the council for counselors who had been here for a long time on the special, I forget what it's called, this the part of the budget in the school for special services, which those are mandatory. We don't really, there is no discretion. And when they go up, they really are mandated, required. And so again, I think helping everybody understand at the beginning the mandatory nature, and then when there is the discretion, that's really the discretionary investments that we need to look through and align on. Are those really the right discretionary investments? How does that relate to the mill rate? And then let the finance committee and council do work. I think the 3% mill rate is always like a barometer. And, I think that's what the community has come to expect. So that's the hard part. But, in my mind, coming in a little bit higher than 3% is okay, coming in a little bit lower, but like that is a good barometer for us to consider. But again, I would like to also say, but are these investments really good investments for our community that we want to push forward, even if we know it's going to be a 4% budget this year? And we feel like they're justified, and we can communicate that and get people on board. So I don't know. Maybe it's more how we work together that we just need to think about.
I'm with Tom on the arbitrary goal-setting number, net budget increase of 5%, so on and so forth. I mean, it took me, I think, 3/4 of the way through the process to realize I wasn't talking about a 1-for-1 5% to tax rate. It took me a while to figure that out. And to your point about investments, I think that if I know this is what we need to hold us steady in a stream that's trying hard to push us back. And when we talk about investments, is if we do these kinds of things, we expect these kinds of returns. Some of them may be financial. It may make more sense to do some of this stuff now. So when I think of the transportation and the traffic study, and say, you've told us that traffic stinks. We want to invest in fixing our traffic problem, and that's going to cost this. I think people can say, oh, I get that. Okay, so I think we should steer clear of goals and focus on tangible results that we are trying to achieve with an estimate of what the cost of those results are. And that gets us out of the trap. So in the school system, there are things that, you're not adding these new programs just because you're trying to achieve something, and maybe you can make a case for it's going to cost a whole lot more than we would aspire to. On the other hand, if we're all lined up around the idea that we want to get the most benefit for the least amount of cost, that ought to be the case to be made, either in the short or the long term.
Yeah, it strikes me this conversation's kind of come full circle, starting off with identifying what is non-discretionary or committed. I think Kate approaches it using the term kind of level services. This is what we did last year. Here's our starting point. And
Right.
let's, for sake of this discussion, call that the committed. It might be some
Sounds like a movie.
right. And then I think Kate's done variations of this through the years. I think last year was probably the best example of that being the starting point. Then there were 8 or 10 different, maybe 12 different kind of investments. Some were required, some were more discretionary, and they all had a story and needed a conversation. So maybe what we should strive for is a bit more holistically presenting a budget that's fully baked, that has all the investments that we think is necessary, but is presented in a way that is compartmentalized, and you can identify what that investment costs. We can have a conversation of why that's so, and you can make a decision whether that's the right thing to do.
I love that approach, and I think this will also help I always look at the presentations that you and the superintendent do as like my reference.
Mhm.
And if that reference is solid, like you just said, then it becomes a good tool for communicating to the public. And again, it starts a different type of conversation. So if we can figure out how to do that, I'm okay recommending to the council that we try and steer clear from a financial target and really go through the process of making sure that we have a budget conversation on where we want to invest. Still, obviously, through the process, I know we will use that 3% as we need to use that as like a barometer to know how high over are we, and use that to kind of have a discussion on. So I think it's not that we get rid of the 3% mill rate, it's part of the conversation as opposed to the end goal that we're trying to get to.
Yeah.
Are you guys?
I think that's right. And I think that the circumstances year to year kind of dictate where we end up there. And last year, we were really sensitive to the fact that people, if justified or not, are going to get a whack on that reval. And so this would not be the year for us to kind of load up stuff. I don't know what this year brings. I think this year was sort of okay, back to kind of normal. And you're right, that historical rate, which is sort of in the ballpark of inflation, is, I think we need to say, yeah, if we can achieve stuff and come in less, great. But on the other hand, there are years when it makes sense to do more when we can.
Councilor Shoup, any comments for you on budget process goals?
Okay. I guess just in the last time, we were just talking about the mill rate. I would love to get rid of the 3% mill rate goal. feel like it constrains us, confuses us, and the residents rely on it. I personally think there's something wrong with the fact that we have the lowest tax rate, but yet we are one of the biggest communities. I will continue to say, I don't think we're meeting our residents' needs, and I don't think 3% every year is enough. So if we could find another way, I think, to have a different goal that didn't stick us into that 3% like that.
Any other stuff on budget? No?
No.
All right. Next item was the need to focus on the capital plan for $5 million capital facilities. So we did the work in the last committee where we better understood for the major capital projects where things landed. Some of the conversation that I've had with April, and I brought it up during the workshop as well with the school, was I'd like to see us do a resolution around this goal that basically says we commit to the school as our top priority near term. And that also based on some of the conversations we've had, potentially having a summit for the other capital needs and really making sure we don't lose sight of, we do have other capital needs, but not commit to do anything near term with other major capital projects. And so, I mean, yeah, I was thinking, yeah. So basically this is something we didn't finish, so we do need to decide how we're finishing it, number one. Resolution could be something for goals that we could discuss at goal setting, but happy to.
Well, I like to represent the residents who want a community center.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of the conversation is around what happens if the school fails. And I think that is a question that we would like answered, or I feel like we would like to have some guidance. And I don't know if we can do that under this capital planning, where we have a community center ready to go. And we have agreed that the school is a priority. I continue, and other residents have concerns about, like, how many no votes are we gonna go, to the extent that now the community center and the amount of money that we've put into that whole project is completely moot and we can't use it anymore. So I think what I have written down here, and what my question, or what I wonder how we can, if we can, is to have that as part of the conversation. Residents want a community center, and if the school continues to fail, I feel like we are again ignoring the residents' request. We spent money on these surveys. They said they want this, they want this. I'm concerned it's gonna be completely lost, and we're gonna be doing this cycle of around and around for a school. I generally have concerns about the short timeline we have for November.
Yeah.
And so I would like to be able to tell the residents what the plan is with the community center. We spent substantial amount of money, time, residents, volunteers' time on it and stuff. And so I think I just don't want to. So when you talk about a resolution, like, yeah, obviously this year for Karen, the school is a priority and we'll get on the ballot. Come November, if it fails, that's
Yeah.
where I
I
have concerns.
like the idea though of a resolution that claims that it is a priority, but I also like, to your point, being clear of what the plan is for the community center in that too, and we could be as specific as, assuming the school passes this year, this is our plan. If the school fails, this is our plan. And it just kind of memorializes our commitment to whatever it is the council wants to do around these two projects. Because again, I think the question people are going to be asking, and they asked last time, that we just need to be able to answer in a real commitment is, how do I look at this school relative to these other capital things? Because it's going to influence some, not everybody's decision for how they vote. And I think we need to have an answer for that. And, to me, a resolution is the best way to kind of make a commitment.
Yep.
And so I don't know the answer to what happens if it passes and what
Well, it
happens
might be
if it
helpful
fails.
from the school to know what their plan is come November if it fails. Are we
Mhm.
doing building steering committee number 3 and finding new residents, or are we looking for mold and calling the state? Like, I just,
Mhm.
and I think, I'm getting a lot of feedback from the residents who have worked hard and want a community center.
Yeah.
And so I don't want to lose sight of that.
Karen, I agree fundamentally with what you're saying, and that this community center has been a conversation, I think, since I first moved here. And my observation is that we could go a long way during this process if we had this summit piece
Mhm.
that addressed the overlap in the Venn diagram where kids are involved with the community service, community center, the library, and the school. Because I think that when we break it out and say community center, that means different things to different people. For some people, it means meeting rooms. I mean, to me, I would prefer to hear the term arts and cultural center because I don't need a basketball court or a gym and so forth. And so I didn't see anything in the plan that sort of addresses our social cultural needs. So I think it's really, really important that we get rid of the silos here and we take a stab, at least considering an alternate school proposal. Here's one that's just a school. Here's one that addresses some of the portion of these additional needs, which if we could get that passed, then you could come back a second bite for a smaller piece around those things that were left out of that. Because I think, you know, what do they say? You keep doing the same thing and get the same result. And I think that there is some potential for that. Because what we learned the last time is for those folks whose real agenda is no, all they need to do is sit up in the sidelines and come up with 4 words to repeat over and over again, and this thing could lose. And we saw that last time. Because so finding a way to create a situation with a school budget where everybody gets a little of what they want would be, I think, a novel approach to it. It would help people of my generation whose kids have long graduated, who are on the fixed income, who see all of this stuff as just taking a larger bite of their disposable. It's a very regressive tax. So finding ways now to say, okay, we've got this over here, but we also have had people working on the library and we've had people working on a community center, and they've been doing it separate. And we've talked about that.
Mhm.
And I just think it's time we get out of that box.
Yeah.
At least try to see if there's some synergy and a way to create plan A and maybe an alternate proposal B, which satisfies some of those needs. And then ask the council, which one of those do we want to put to ballot?
Yeah,
One of the comments that you made, I think, kind of, I will throw out there, we will have a new community services director coming. One of the thoughts that I've continued to have is maybe we shouldn't be asking for an $80 million community center. Maybe we should say we want a teen senior center. Maybe we should say,
Aquatics
maybe
facility.
we should now I'm speaking against myself, where we just did this whole process for an 80 million. Voters will not, they don't like big numbers. So
Yeah.
the more I'm involved in this, the more I watch, and we talk about capital planning over 5 million. I mean, so people don't want to do 80 million. I mean, personally, with my life, I think we are a screaming need for a teenage center and a senior center. And I just wonder if we need to pivot at some point. And I know this is a totally new proposal, but I just wonder if between 80 is too high, we need a new school, but we clearly we have a huge lacking in so many different departments. For me, it's the seniors and the teens, I think, personally. And so I just don't know if maybe that's something else that we should bring to the conversation is we're never going to get our $80 million community center. Should we be breaking this down more
Yeah.
into smaller chunks?
And I think that's precisely what the notion of the summit was about, was what are our priorities of space needs and where do those priorities get serviced? Is it its own building? Is it a library thing? Is it something the school could accommodate? And really kind of figuring out strategically, how would we want to go about prioritizing and building a plan that helps to get there? Which again, I think is something we can do in parallel while the school does their piece. And again, I don't think this is something we could accomplish in a year. I actually think this focus, because I just want to get to some of the other topics. This feels like a bigger conversation for the full council. I think we've probably done our work as a committee with what we did last year. So I don't know if we need it as a committee focus as much as we can just make sure we bring this conversation when we do council goals and I'm hearing at least between the three of us, some sort of agreement of, you know, there needs to be enough, more conversations about the other capital needs, trying to maybe break them down and getting out of our silos is important. But supporting the school in its endeavor right now is really the priority and the focus, and we have a committee doing it. So how would we want to address this other thing? Is it that summit? Is it something else? Like, and that can be a council conversation. All right, next is the Sustainability Reserve Fund. So this was something actually, I think it was last January that the Sustainability Committee came forward.
For the day, January 14th,
Yeah.
2023.
And we never got to it because of other competing priorities and it wasn't a council goal. I don't really recall the background of this, Tom. I don't know if you can remind us, but I know this was something that the committee was really.
Essentially, it was to, for the various investments we've made and therefore savings that accrue, whether it's the LED streetlight conversion some years back, installation of rooftop solar. There's a number of other things. I guess most recently, some of the initiatives on charging stations. What they want to do is, to the extent we can identify savings because of sustainable practices, they would like those monies to go to a reserve fund for further investment in additional sustainable practices, essentially.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. So it's not like they're bringing money in, they're just saying, oh, because you're doing sustainable practices, we're saving you money, and the money that you are now saving, we want you to use it this way and put it in this fund, correct?
Essentially, I'll recirculate this memo, but I think
No, and that's what I remember, because I think, and then we have this reserve fund, but who has access to it?
I would expect we'd set it up that the council controls it.
Right,
And then-
that's where I think I had some concerns, because I thought it was like anyone could apply because they want to do something sustainable. I definitely had some concerns about this because it's, you know, I mean, I'm glad we're saving money, but then we're literally putting it right back into something. I think I had concerns about who can get that money.
Envision, if you want to go down this road, we would set it up not dissimilar to the land bond fund, which has you know, the authorization from the voters articulates the purposes, the council controls it. Another example would be the Housing Initiative Fund. The council created a reserve account. In that account, prior council identified what its potential uses could be, but again, the council controls the ultimate use. So I think you could develop systems that would answer all those questions.
I think just for this one, perhaps, like, I have no problem at least having the Sustainability Committee come and kind of pitch their case.
Yeah.
Ask questions, give them feedback and have them go back and continue to work on it. And I don't think we have heavy agenda items for January, so we could even say next January, we can invite them if they're available.
Sure.
I know Rick Meinking was the big proponent of this, and I don't think he's on the committee anymore, so we may want to invite him as a resident to participate. Since it was really I think he was really the advocate for this within the committee. So if you guys are okay with it, if we want to make it a January agenda item, invite them to come and kind of pitch their idea and then just give them feedback.
Good, I'll extend that offer.
Yeah, I need to know a lot more about it.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I just know when we did our little dinner gathering, they came up to me and they were like, when is this gonna get on the agenda? You said last year and you haven't, so I said, okay, we'll put it back up for conversation and we can at least put it on the agenda. The next item was expanding the downtown TIF to include additional contiguous properties. So again, I think this was part of the broader conversation where we were like, first we gotta update the policy, then we gotta do something, and then eventually we'll revisit expanding the TIF boundary because there's some undeveloped properties contiguous to the current downtown TIF district that we may want to expand. And so I'm just putting that out as a unfinished business. And is that something we want to focus on, or?
I don't know, is it marshland?
I don't,
No, one of the areas that was thought about expanding into would be to consume the Enterprise Business Park, which is contiguous and it is ripe for development. And the other one is on the upper side, the cottages at Sawyer. It's an active residential subdivision. And actually the Downs team bought some additional land that's still zoned BR4. It's not part of the CBD. But that's another potential area that we could consume into the larger TIF area.
I think that the question of how much business space for economic development do we have left? Where do we think it could go in conjunction with the question of this? I know these things have been discussed in a lot of forums that I haven't been part of, but I think that that feels to me like we're starting to bump up against that in a number of ways. And so TIF districts are more of a tool to advance some kind of a strategy that says, okay, we've done all of this. We have Crossroads over here, we have Hagus Parkway, et cetera. So what do we have left to do? How do we want to focus that? And what tools do we need to put around that?
Yeah, the notion would be that there would, at this point, there's no proposal or request for any credit enhancement agreement on any of these additional areas. So we'd be keeping it all for ourselves. The trade-off is we're able to get shelter benefit, which could be significant if these parcels do in fact develop. The trade-off in exchange for the shelter benefit is that we're limited in how we can use those funds. You know, the one thing that we've never fully explored is the potential of either a school or a community center being able to use TIF funds to pay the debt. And we have basic threshold approval from the state that we can do that. Will require some fairly complicated machinations legally and financially to do that. But that would be another reason potentially of expanding if to the extent that we want to site one of these facilities in this area, it will be even easier if it's within the TIF district.
Yeah. So my thought is like, I think we need a conversation about the TIF in general, and part of that could be to expand or not to expand. The other piece that I just remembered was we are getting to a point where we are potentially at risk of withholding more in the TIF fund than we have the ability to spend on qualified projects. And so I don't know if we're there yet, but I do think maybe this year we need to kind of reassess. Are we withholding the right amount, and do we need to shift more back into the general fund? And so, or do we need to update our qualified project list? So I think we do need to like revisit the downtown TIF in particular, and just make sure that we're just kind of looking at it again. Is it the right boundaries? Are we withholding the right amount? Are there other things we need to do? I'm talking more about affordable housing. I don't know like how affordable housing TIFs fall into this, and like, is this something we want to bring in? So again, I do think, go ahead.
I just had two questions.
Mhm.
When you create a TIF, does that attract development? Is a developer going to be like, they just made this a TIF district, I want to develop there?
In the classic scenario, yes, if you choose to reimburse some of those taxes back to them through a CEA. There are other cases where we may invest in other public infrastructure that they see value in. So it wouldn't be a detriment to them. Anyone locating within the TIF is assessed their taxes. They pay their taxes like anyone else. It's whether or not you share any of it back to them.
Right. Well, I guess my concern is, you know, does converting more land to a TIF give the perception that we're promoting more growth?
Mhm.
Saying, oh, we want more expansion. And that's, I'm asking, I don't know, because that is the perception I do.
It
not
certainly does if there's a CEA associated. I
Okay.
would say that is a clear incentive inducement for something for development.
But the
Yeah.
TIF is the first step. So,
You need a TIF to get
so
a
then someone's
CEA.
gonna come in and probably say, I want a CEA.
Yeah.
And we'll sit here and be like, no.
I would sit here and be no, but I don't know if everybody would. So again, I think
And I
to
think
me,
that's, I'm just making that point to say that's perception that can be given.
Sure.
And
Real.
that hesitates me.
And I think as part of our communications over the next year, we need to start conveying some more information about the nuance of growth. That what we don't want is 1 million more single-family homes, because those, I come to understand, are the most expensive. But having certain types of industry, retail, those types of things don't necessarily drive people into the community. They provide services to the community, employment for people who already live in the community, those types of things.
Yeah.
So, you know, I think that we need to be careful there because I think there's certain amount of, I'll just call it economic development that
Mhm.
we should be pursuing that helps us with our growth and taxes.
About a whole question of commercial versus residential.
Well, exactly, yeah.
I think that's where, I mean, I think even this conversation to me is like a reason why it would be good to have this on the agenda for debate, discussion, assessing pros and cons, because your point is a very good point of like, what's the perception it gives, but yours is too in terms of, but we need economic development. And again, in my mind, I want to figure out, are we withholding too much that we're going to put ourselves in a position where we'll have money sitting in an account that we can't apply to taxes? And so again, I think it's a worthy topic for us to explore and make sure. And again, the answer may be, we're doing nothing, which is fine, but we need to go through that process and
Yeah.
review.
Yeah, in this current budget, I worked hard to spend the available tip dollars, and I expect it will be a equally tough challenge next year. The one area that I've not explored that I think there's a whole bunch of opportunity is traffic investments. That's a
Yeah.
qualified purpose. I think we're gonna have we do have a lot of good information from the traffic plan, so if that's an area that we want to explore further, I think, I don't think we'll have those issues in the near term if we start to invest in traffic in a big way.
John, this conversation is exactly what I was referring to yesterday as sort of a workshop-y type part of the council meeting, where instead of having people coming in and presenting to us or having an issue, we have basically this kind of discussion with the full council expanded in the eye of the public so that they can hear us bat these questions around a little bit.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah, so I think, I mean, again, we can bring this as a potential goal focus area and decide, is this something the finance committee tackles, or is this a broader conversation at the broader council level that we want to work
We
through?
should
But again,
start having fireside chats.
that's exactly
All right.
right. And would you put a little fire, like a fake fire in the budget?
course.
so that can-
Course, bring it
next is, I'm gonna call it the Counselor Shoop fee, the stormwater management fee.
Fees I want to talk
Oh,
about.
yeah.
Okay, well, go ahead.
Oh, no.
Do you want to set this, like, I know this is an area that you brought up, that we've said we should do something, we should explore it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just something that I thought we should explore, that some of the towns around us have stormwater management fees. And I do understand that a lot of those towns had those implemented in response to maybe issues. And so I do appreciate that. However, I think being with the amount of land that we have next to all of the wetlands and things like that, I think a lot of our services that Public Works performs would be covered under stormwater management fee. And so, you know, like right now, it's just that's a taxpayer. Taxpayers are paying all of the Public Works Department's budget, and we're paying all of the engineering department's budget. But yet they have projects and day-to-day things that they're doing that would be covered by a fee. And so why I want to explore it is because we're taking that out of the taxpayers' money, and then it's a fee that you can apply across the town. So I think, as I've mentioned before, we have some really big health corporations in here who are tax exempt, but yet have, 90% of their property is a parking lot. And yet they benefit from, and all of their patients benefit from us keeping the roads clear, their patients being able to get there, and all of those things. I think it's at least at a minimum worth exploring. And so I think that would consist of seeing what part of, the Public Works Department budget would be technically covered under the stormwater management fee. And then I think some of the projects that Angela's doing would be covered by a stormwater management fee. And then on top of that, we have the vulnerability assessment coming down. So I just would imagine that's going to be another thing that another tool, another thing that's going to be pointing us to projects and things that we need to be addressing directly in response to stormwater. I think we're talking about it a lot and we're learning about it. And I think I wonder if it would be more beneficial for the residents, and it would be more cost efficient for the residents if we could remove it from the taxes that way.
I think it's worth.
I do think it's worth pursuing. particularly on the day after our, sort of NOAA alert yesterday,
Mhm.
meaning the ARC. That makes sense to me. I think the other thing that I know we do some of, but I just would like to get it more prominent on the list is the idea of grants for some of these things and seeing how we can leverage the fact that the federal government seems to, at least for the time being, sees our marsh as being, on the national radar screen. And so when we begin to think about what we're going to do with Route 1, for example, and
Mhm.
those kinds of things, who knows, maybe Elon and VBAC will just put an end to all of these things, but we should still try.
Yeah.
And do some towns, do towns or the GP cog or whatever have professional grant writers that help with this stuff? How does, I don't even know how this stuff works, or you do.
I don't, I'll tell
Oh,
you, you're
are
touching
you-
on one of my big goals that will be coming, because that's one of my biggest questions is we get all these, those magazines we get, and they talk about all the money
Yeah.
that has been put into this, and I am very eager to find out what staff has been applying for, what we can apply for. That one of my goals for 2025 is to identify how many grants are out there that we could apply for and see how many. I was gonna email the communications committee, the new one, because Falmouth in their newsletter puts in their newsletter every time what they're applying for, what they've gotten. I have no idea what Scarborough's doing, nothing. And so I think that's gonna be part of the conversation as well.
I think that's a good, I mean, I know we've been talking to the Downs about partnering on grants for transportation. So again, I like the notion of some goal around, are we, like, how are we, what is our grant strategy and what are we doing, and making sure that we're pursuing those alternative.
Right, they didn't know, I found out about climate action plan. And so like that, staff didn't know about that. And so I think there's definitely stuff going on that people don't know about just because they have so much going on.
Yeah,
To that point, as we go to budget, a reasonable question to ask is, if there is a lot of money out there, then I think of a professional grant writer as something that produces a return on investment. That, it's sort of like your development director in a private charity. And that if you think that in year one, you could get a grant that would do something and cover all or some of that person's salary, then it would be worth pursuing. I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm guessing that these folks earn their keep.
this is just so out of my domain that I don't know, but again, I think this is,
Guess what one of my next goals was to expand the engineering department with more staff so we can implement the open space plan, the vulnerability assessment and the climate action plan.
yeah.
So, well, been waiting to get to my goals.
Yeah, go ahead, keep going.
No, but that's, I think you're kind of touching on what one of my goals was, so I want to say it, like, I mean, I don't, and I, that's not really our part, but like in the budget, one of our goals, like, I think to continue to support our 30 by 30, the fact that we need to protect the marsh, we've invested in an open space plan, vulnerability assessment, we have a climate action plan coming out, and we literally have Angela and Jamie down there. And, and Autumn's a different department. I think we talked about this last budget
Mhm.
season, and I'm gonna reemphasize, like, I think it would be crazy if we did all these plans and then we just don't have the staff. I mean, currently, right now, Jamie can barely get to what the Conservation Commission. And I mean, that's like, in my mind, the most important committee.
Yeah,
But I think that's just gives you a perception, and so,
well, I mean, and to your point though, like the grants could be a way to fund new staff. So again, yeah, I think there's something here to potentially explore next year and bring to council goals and get a sense of like directionally, is this important? I'm sure we have other stuff, but I mean, again, when I look at what we have right now, I feel like our plate is full, so I don't know if there's other
so
things.
I have
you
one
guys-
goal.
Yes,
kinda-
one more.
I just get one more. Well, it's gonna be super vague and then we'll just break it down. I think we should look at places where we can increase fees or create fees. So specifically, when we talk about applying for grants, I know the new harbor master has been like applying and getting all these grants and things all the time. He also brought to my attention that we're the only town with a fire response harbor master boat, but yet we are responding to other towns. And so we've been wondering if that's not mutual aid and that's something we can charge for. Because he's responding to Old Orchard every time 2 lifeguards go in the water, but yet they're not responding to us when we have 2 lifeguards in the water. So like, I would like
We
to,
don't have 2 lifeguards to go in the water.
yeah.
True.
He was wondering, I'm wondering if there is potential for a fee to charge that, because that is something beyond, or we're wondering if that's something beyond the normal mutual aid response. He seemed to think there was. And then with fees, I just know that we're probably, you know, that ambulances are actually moneymakers and we use them a lot. And so I know last year we created the lifting fee. I think just because of the world I work in, I'm wondering if there's other Medicare coded services that we could be billing for under the ambulances. That maybe we don't want to, they're really nice. I wonder if there's other coded things that we could be doing. And then just increase fees. I feel like, I wonder if there's just every department could go through and say, hey, we haven't raised our fees in 5 years. We are readjusting, or we're going to be proposing to readjust the beach fees this year, which will see some adjustments, some increases and decreases. But I think generally, I don't know if that's just something maybe each department could just do a quick look on and.
Is there ever, like, when we do, I know every year during the budget, we do like a fee update. Is that more ad hoc, or is that like, do they do a comprehensive review of fees and then bring forward recommendations? And maybe it's just a matter of us getting a little bit more visibility department by department on like how they look at fees, reassess them, and you know, are there new fees that they're thinking about or new fees that could be in a discussion? But I like the idea of like a fee review, like, and make sure that we do a comprehensive fee review. But if it's something that's already happening and maybe we just need more exposure at the committee level, I think that's.
I was wondering, I'm just gonna put this out there, because the Public Works Department is operated like a business. And I just didn't know, because, you know, we're being told that, you know, they operate and so I don't know if those fees are appropriate, I guess. I don't know a lot about business, but I don't know if we're charging enough, if we could charge more, if it's actual cost breakdown, things like that.
We've got a margin of 25%, our costs plus 25%. So
Mm.
could it be more? I suppose. But I assure you, we're not losing money.
Right.
Yeah.
But could we be making more?
Maybe this could be something just in the budget process when we meet with departments. Part of it could be explain your fees a little bit more and tell us what you think. And so that way we can use the budget process and the staff reviews as an opportunity to look at fees.
Maybe, yes.
And Tom, I would be very happy with my cost plus 25% in my little auto repair shop. You might not be, but I would be. I would be.
Shockingly, even with that hefty margin, it's cheaper than they can get commercially.
Mhm.
Right, right. So, well, yeah, because our costs, you know, really aren't fully loaded for our direct cost is what you're saying. So do you put in?
No, I'll show you the spreadsheet. It's pretty well developed.
So you had, so you
Level of
basically
overhead,
it's fully loaded?
Fully loaded.
Okay, well, that's great. So there you go, Karen. I think we could change
But-
the name on the sign to say Scarborough Inc.
So good goal discussion. What I'll do as a next step is I was taking notes, so I'll try and like synthesize what the committee said, and if we have another meeting before council goals, we can look at them. If we don't, and council goals is before, then I can bring them and we can discuss them further, based on what we discussed in the committee. All right, I want to make sure we give staff time to go through the next item, which is the bond issuance.
Yes, we're trying to get back on a regular schedule. Historically, our cadence has been to do an annual borrowing sometime early in the year, spring of the year, Q1 or Q2. We got tripped up and went a couple of years during COVID, and more importantly, the transition with finance directors kind of tripped us up. But I think we're back on schedule. And so what's before you is a list of projects. They've been previously approved through the budget process or by the voters in the case of the land bond. These are projects that we've done, we've paid for using existing funds. Norm mentioned earlier, when we pay things in advance, we pay ourselves back with bond proceeds. So we've got about $3.8 million of projects. It's split between the town and the school. It looks like 2.55 of that is school related and 1.32 of the bond issue are town projects. And our proposal is to bring this matter to the council next week, a bond order. And that would put us in a position to have rating calls early in the new year. And ideally close the bond sometime late January, early February at this point. So with that, I'll let Norm take it a bit deeper if he wishes.
Thank you. Yeah, it's, we're basically 14 months after the last bond issue, so we are back on that somewhat annual cycle. Liam, if you wouldn't mind rolling back to the schedule there real quick. This is what Joe Couture, our municipal advisor, is suggesting the schedule should look like. Kind of working from the bottom up. The sale would be February 4th. And we would get our proceeds February 20th, so early in the calendar year. And that fits in between the two due dates for the property tax payments. As the schedule goes, this is very doable. You know, I fully support this schedule, so. And as you see, it dovetails right on having a fresh audit, which the rating reviewers like to have timely information. So the schedule should work well for us.
The timing of the audit has helped us bring this to you maybe 2 months earlier than we normally do. Leave it February, March conversation, but we really have it now just because we had the audit in hand.
Mhm.
And we think we'll hit the market actually at a really good point. There's not going to be many other offerings early in the year like this.
According to Joe, January is usually a slow time as far as bond issuances go, so that could potentially work in our favor on the rate that we have to pay.
Mhm.
And then if we can roll back to the projects list there. As Tom mentioned, those bottom two projects are related to the 2019 land bond. Those have been previously approved by council and voters, so the ask as far as bond authorization would be for everything above that on the schedule. But those are included there just as a reminder that the authorization to borrow has already been previously approved.
Why, Kate or Norm, do you guys mind giving some insight? Because I got a question from one resident about the district-wide IT for it being 620,000 and how that's over our charter threshold of 600,000. My understanding is that these are a bunch of little things that just add up. It's not like
They are.
Yeah, and typically we interpret that to be if it's, 600 computers and they each cost $1,000.
Yeah.
Then it's not really quite the same thing as a fire truck that
Yeah.
costs $750. So yeah, that's exactly what that is. That's multiple devices, replacement devices for students and staff.
Mhm. Any questions for Norm? Any questions?
So we would ask for a vote to move this to the council.
Can I get a motion?
Second?
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Thank you.
Motion passes.
Just next Wednesday.
Yep. All right, next item is scheduling our standard meeting time. Does this say, or yesterday actually in communications, we were trying to see if we could do this in communications on the same day. I think Scott has a hard time coming in before 5:30. So I don't know, Karen, if you have flexibility, if we were to move the start time for this from 4 to start at 4 o'clock instead of 5 o'clock. And if not, that's okay. We can keep it.
Well, because we just scheduled ANC on Wednesdays at 4, so I'm now leaving work 2 days
Okay.
early. That is difficult for me.
Okay, we don't have, we can keep it at 5 o'clock if that works. And then maybe we can follow up with Scott and the communications committee, like, would we wanna, I wouldn't wanna do this to staff, but we could start at 6:30. I just feel like that could be late for staff, so it might be good to look for a different time. After 5:30 for comms committee.
Can I make a suggestion? Maybe, I think because so much of the communications committee is focused on council business, it might not be a bad idea to have it be the Thursday following one of your regular council meetings. Because whether you're communicating out, you're gonna be 2 weeks from the prior meeting, it was just an idea.
Yeah, I'd be
Or
good with that. Thursday, the 3rd.
Either the first or the third Thursday.
And that doesn't conflict with
The
any.
only thing I've been trying to achieve is 1 week in which I do not think about this. And so whether or not that is realistic or not, I don't know. But.
But we're trying to avoid the fourth week, so I think that's your week.
Yeah,
Is that my
To
week?
not,
Yes.
you'd still have 1 week to not think about things, just you'd have to think about council,
Okay, can
weeks
make
1
sure
through
that's
3.
in the- Make sure that goes in the meeting. Otherwise, I'm fine with that. That's
Yeah.
good.
We can look at conflicts to see whether the first or the third Thursday makes more sense with other boards and committees, but why don't we circle back to you
Yeah.
on that?
And if we needed it, well, yeah, Scott, I
And
think
that's,
Scott,
again, we're talking about communications, not
communications.
finance, so this could be
Yeah.
okay.
so we're good with, what is this, the second
Thursday.
Thursday, 5 o'clock, keep it as is. Okay,
Question though,
Yep.
next,
And then Liam, you'll tell me when the communication meets.
We'll circle back on the
Thank you,
communications date
appreciate
time.
because next month our meetings are shifted.
so it'd be on the 8th is the council meeting, and then
Oh, our-
9th would be this meeting. So does that work?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Because it is kind of a weird month with,
Yeah, because I had to push everything to the third week.
Yeah.
Election.
right? Is there anybody in the public who would like to comment? Anybody know? All right, can I get a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second.
All in favor? All right, thanks, everyone. Thank you, Kate, for joining us, and I'm Norm Nick.
Thank you for